Alrighty, folks, it is time for the kickoff of Grand Prix Everrime, the final standard Grand Prix of the Exalts of Twiltree standard season, and indeed the last standard Grand Prix of 2025. It is crazy to think that that is already where we are at with this year, but next month has already been announced to be an internal format, so yeah, this is going to be the last hurrah of standard this year. As I am recording this, the tournament has already kicked off. I'm about an hour out of my round one match, but I'm going to save any discussion about that for the intro to that video. It is also the week of the set submission deadline for Revolution's next rotation. So if you are a set designer in the community, have played your requisite matches to qualify for set submission and have not yet, this is one of your last warnings, your last notices to make sure that you submit before it is too late. I know that I am doing what I can to put the final touches on my set because this will be my first time submitting. So good luck to everybody else who is submitting as well. Really excited to see what set gets into the format at the start of next year. And excited to get my hands on some new cards, see how the format changes with Awakening in Oldune headed out the door. With all of that said, let's talk about Grand Prix Everrime. Let's talk about the Cliques of Nylon buffs and what deck I've selected for this month. So Grand Prix Everrime is the final standard tournament of this year. It is the final standard tournament of Exalts of Twiltree, and it being the third month means that we have some pretty big buffs from Cliques of Nylon to shake up the format. The big card that was on everyone's radar, and I'll just go ahead and pull it up here, is Envoy of the Fallen. This is really the big showstopper of the buff patch. Envoy of the Fallen, 4 mana, 3/3 human soldier with lifelink. When it enters, you return any number of target creature cards with total mana value 3 or less from graveyard to the battlefield, and you can sacrifice another creature at instant speed for no mana to deal 1 damage to each opponent. You will also gain that much life because Envoy has lifelink, of course. So Envoy kind of pushes in two very distinct directions. There is the more sort of traditional expected aristocrats plan. I have been saying in the community for a while now that I feel like the sacrifice themes presented by sets like Cliques of Nylon and Kitso Dusk of Time seem like there's a lot of really good things going on there, but that it was a free sacrifice outlet away from really starting to hum properly. And sure enough, Envoy of the Fallen has been pushed into the format, and now I am seeing Aristocrats kill on turn 4. Envoy coming down on turn 4, especially because we have 2 different 1-drops from Kitsuo that sacrifice, or that when sacrificed can make treasures for you. Means that when you take your Envoy pop-off turns, you can then create more mana through Envoy of the Fallen, sacrificing your creatures that make treasures, and you can also get those creatures back because they're all 1-drops, so Envoy can get 3 of those back, functionally make 3 mana when it enters, while dealing 3 to the opponent, and just teeing up a lot more sacrifice down the line. There's also the value sort of mid-rangey angle of Envoy, where it is also just an unearth effect in your deck that can unearth any relevant 2 or 3 drop, possibly even also a 1-drop while you're at it. And can sacrifice creatures that are being targeted with removal, and also has an infinite combo, kind of reminiscent of one that was recently printed in Canon Magic with the advent of the Spider-Man set. That being that Envoy the Fallen reanimates a 3-drop when it enters, and if you reanimate Karina's Substitute, this 3-mana 1/4 will enter as a copy of a creature you control, except it's a 1/4 and a toy in addition to its other types. So if you have it enter as a copy of Envoy of the Fallen with a second substitute in your graveyard, you can have the substitute enter as an Envoy, target the other substitute in your graveyard, and then sacrifice the substitute whose trigger is on the stack to the real Envoy to deal 1 to the opponent. Then that substitute dies, the other one comes back, enters as a copy of Envoy, and you just start looping for infinite damage. So that is not something I'm seeing aristocrat builds really lean into. That's something more of like a Grixis mid-range plan with the Envoy substitute as like a plan B. And both options are really strong. Envoy is definitely showing to be one of the strongest tools out of the Nyland buff patch. I know it has become a little divisive in the crowd. For my 2 cents, I'm so glad to have a free sacrifice outlet at long last. I am a huge fan of Aristocrat's strategies, and you might be surprised to hear me say that given that I'm not playing Envoy, and I almost did submit Envoy this month, but I ultimately decided that I figured it was going to be covered by a lot of other people, and I could take time heading into this GP, sort of whittling away at what I felt was the best Envoy list, or I could go a completely different direction and just build something stupid, simple. It may get to do a lot of really cool things. I may go 0-2. We will see. I'm kind of allowing myself to take the stakes off of my shoulders and not put the pressure on myself to have to make this particular GP one where I have to just go as hard as possible. So I'm playing a deck that I think is a little goofier, maybe not as strictly competitive as something like the Envoy Shells would be. There are some other decks in the field as well that I think are much more competitive than what I've brought, but I have brought what is effectively White Weenie. And it is White Weenie with 4 drops and even a couple 5 drops. And that is all made possible by Radiant Devotee. So for folks who have been around for a little bit, have been watching my videos for a little while now, you may remember from my Exalt of Twiltree set review that I made a called shot that this card was one of the most fucked up things that Twiltree had coming into the format, specifically from the September patch notes, where we got a look at all of the cards from Twiltree that were getting changed. So in the initial reveal that Twiltree was coming to the format, Blessed Line Warden was a 1-mana 1/2, if I recall correctly, and Radiant Devotee was a 2-mana 3/2, I believe. Different text on Radiant Devotee, but functionally the same effect of giving your angels convoke, but only your soldiers can be used to convoke those spells. Devotee and Line Warden were both changed. Line Warden was pushed up to a 2-drop because it was deemed to be a little too effective as a 1-mana anthem. And the card I was saying was potentially the most broken part of that package got a buff down to a 1-mana 2/1 to accommodate. And I was a little, more than a little, terrified. But it hasn't really done some truly spectacularly powerful things. Now, I'm not the first person to bring Devotee to a GP by any measure. To my understanding, Kilgaris has brought it to a GP. If anyone else has brought it to a GP that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head, please, by all means, correct me in the comments or in the Revolution chat. But Devotee has not really put up the results to match my initial doomsaying about it. Then, in the Nyland buff patch, we got a very good omen. Tomer Figurehead President was buffed to now be all colors and, importantly, all creature types. So it is a soldier and an angel now. He also gives your spells Conspire, so as you cast a spell, you can tap 2 untapped creatures that share a color with it to copy that spell. That can be pretty handy, and Devotee does mean that when you attack with an angel, all of your soldiers untap, so that means that you have more fodder to then conspire your spells. It does also mean you have more fodder to convoke out angels in your hand. But the most important thing here really is just that Tomer Figurehead President is an angel and a soldier. Now, one of the cards that I think has quietly been one of the biggest workhorses for Devotee is Ambitious Angel. I know I have had folks who have treated me like I'm crazy for saying this card looks good in this context, but Ambitious Angel truly does a lot for Devotee. It is a 1-drop that you can play off of Radiant Devotee turn 1. It can then convoke out other angels turn 1. So if you have Radiant Devotee, Ambitious Angel, that is 3 1-mana creatures on turn 1. And while those 1-mana creatures are not individually supremely threatening, collectively they actually do mean a lot when it comes to the amount of tempo you just gained. And that is the name of the game of this strategy, is that we are trying to acquire tempo and push as much damage as we can, kill the opponent as quickly as we can, and keep our opponent on the back foot long enough that we can kill them. We do have some mechanisms for trying to recover if our opponent catches back up on the board. It helps that our top end is primarily evasive creatures. But even on the lower end of the scale, Ambitious Angel is just a nice, cheap, evasive tool that benefits well from our anthems and can help us convoke things out and untap our soldiers with a devotee in play, because when Ambitious Angel attacks, not only will it untap itself, it'll untap each other soldier as well. So Devotee, Ambitious Angel are really the core here as far as the 1-drops go. We do have another 1-drop in Softlight Harmonious. We have 3 of these. This just sort of gives us a bit more value and utility in terms of how many stats we're putting into play on turn 1. We can use this and reprieve a creature to give us the chance to protect it from sorcery speed removal, while also giving us the opportunity to, develop a 2/2 flyer for 1 mana is pretty significant. Very, very, very like reasonable lower end power scale turns where we can go, turn 1 Devotee, pick Devotee up to reprieve out, to convoke and then reprieve a Softlight Harmonist, and then we just end turn 1 with a 2/2 flyer while holding our Devotee for another turn where it can rush something out. That can be reasonable enough on its own. So Harmonist is another one of our angels. At the 2-drop slot, we have the Blessed Lion Wardens, good for antheming our soldiers, good for protecting our angels. They kind of, both of those types want the things that Lion Warden is offering here. Our angels are things we want to protect from removal a little bit more. Our soldiers are things we want to have with a little more power, because they're going to be stuck on the ground, and so they need all the help they can get in terms of applying damage. So very, very nice balance there. Resolute Reinforcements just puts a couple soldiers into play. On a turn where we have Devotee and an angel to convoke out, this is essentially we spend 2 mana to cast that angel while also putting 2 tapped 1/1s into play in the process. This also works really nicely with our reprieve cards like Softlight Harmonist, where we can sort of set ourselves back on tempo a little bit, pick up the reinforcements itself, and then redevelop it to get another token out of the exchange, while also getting the benefit of the reprieve clause on Harmonist. And then our other 2-drop is Virtualized Onomastic. This is an exception to the rule of everything being a soldier or an angel, because this is just purely main deck anti-board wipe tech. Board wipes do do a significant number to our ability to get our feet underneath us. So if we can name a key removal spell or a key board wipe, Virtualized Onomastic does a lot to hinder that from negatively impacting us. It also helps that Onomastic, when our opponent casts a spell into Onomastic and gets it countered, they get a creature that's on the ground, so all of our angels are unabated, unaffected by the Onomastic putting a roadblock in the way. For a 3-drop slot, it's actually relatively sparse. We only have Containment Seraph for 3-mana creatures. This is one of the cheaper angels we will be convoking out a lot of times. This is good for picking singular blockers out of the way. This is good for just picking off problematic creatures, so long as they are not tokens. And then when it leaves, the exiled card's owner draws X and gains X life, where X is half that card's mana value rounded up. Ideally, we're not having this leave play if we can help it, but I have absolutely, in playtesting, picked up a Containment Seraph with Softlight Harmonist and then replayed it to clear another blocker, and gotten more value out of the board pressure that I unlocked than my opponent was able to get from the leave trigger drawing them cards and gaining them life. Even if I'm exiling something that costs like 4 or 5 mana. The 4-drop slot is pretty tight. We've got 7 cards at 4 mana, and that is benefited in part because on the sort of high roll end of things, if we get Radiant Devotee plus an Ambitious Angel out on turn 1, turn 2 we can play a 4-drop. So we can play Tomer, Figurehead President, of course. And nice thing about Tomer is that he can then help convoke out other things. He can attack and untap our soldiers as well, much like Ambitious Angel can. When we have a Devotee out, but we can also convoke out Aegis of Grace. 4 mana 4/4 flyer with lifelink, prevents all damage that would be dealt to battles we protect, so a little bit of bullying to battle control, though I don't think there's a whole lot of battles in the field in general right now. And then gives us battles we control and other creatures we control hexproof. So gives sort of insulates our other creatures from removal, protects us from any burn that might go to the dome or hand attack or anything. And if we can get 2 copies of Aegis of Grace into play, either by just convoking 2 out, or perhaps we get Tomer in play first and Conspire out an Aegis of Grace, then we can have these give each other hexproof and just completely shut off targeted removal. And then finally, 2 copies of Dawnhymn Herald at the top of our creature suite. These are going to be the things we probably board out the most often, but they can be nice value bombs. Make a pair of 1/1s, gain 5 life. We can pick off some larger creatures in a pinch. We can pick up one of our creatures to get multiple modes out of that enter trigger. So we can potentially, reuse Resolute Reinforcements or Containment Seraph. And one of the things that's just nice about Dawnhymn Herald as well is that it is a 4-power flying attacker that can do quite a lot of work in a pinch. There's a lot of board stalling happening right now in this format outside of the context of Envoy. And Aegis of Grace, Dawnhymn Herald are good at punching through those board stalls just because there's not a whole lot of flying kicking around right now. So Dawnhymn Herald, kind of the capper here on the creature curve. Otherwise, we only have 4 non-creature spells. That would be a playset of Consume the Divines. This is a triple white enchantment. Whenever a creature we control attacks, we put a +1/+1 counter on it. And then whenever a creature we control dies, if it had 3 or more counters on it, we draw a card. So essentially, this just lets our creature start swinging harder and harder. What I have found most often is that if we can get 2 of these in play, our opponent cannot recover the board in time. Our board will just continue to spiral rapidly out of control as our creatures get 2 +1/+1 counters each time they attack. It is very much sort of the same damage amplifying effect that we see from Fabricated Anomaly in red decks right now, where Anomaly is so good that you kind of don't want other Graveyard Matters resources, because burning cards in your graveyard for reasons besides Anomaly's attack trigger just aren't as valuable as Anomaly putting +1/+1 counters on your creatures when they attack. And Consume the Divine requires no special deck build around decisions of just put a bunch of cards in our graveyard like Fabricated Anomaly would. The only consideration for Consume the Divine that becomes tricky is that it is a triple white cost. And we actually could do this very easily. We could just play a bunch of planes. We have nothing in our deck that's really demanding we play anything other than planes. But I've chosen to be a little stupid about it anyways. We're on 3 copies of Neostelia, which is a land that enters tapped unless you control a basic non-planes land. Now, we could just play, we're on 20 lands. We could play 17 lands, 3 Neostelias, and go, okay, this is usually going to be a tapped land. We'll have turns where we can't spend all our mana. We can play this on those turns. And then we can pay 3 mana and tap it to give our angels or our soldiers +1 power. When we activate it, that can be used in the middle of combat, so we can sort of trick our opponent into making bad blocks, or we could just push extra damage with Neostelia. But what if I had a way to prevent us from getting a tapped land? So stupidly, I have chosen to play a Singleton Wastes. And this 1 Wastes means that when this is in play, it is a basic land that is not a plains, so Neostelia will enter untapped. Now, the problem here is that we're playing a basic Wastes in a deck with a triple white pip card. So the way I've chosen to adapt to that is by playing a full playset of Primal Fissures, so we functionally have 5 cards that could be that Wastes. And we have 4 copies of Coalesced Mesa, where our colorless sources could be producing white mana instead if we pay 1 life when we generate that mana. So essentially, if we have the Wastes in play, we have Coalesced Mesa in play, we have Neostelia in play, we could still pay 2 life and get a Consume the Divine out on curve. Is that amazing? Again, I could try and fine-tune it to make it as strong as I could possibly make it. I think the strongest build of this deck does not waste its time with the basic Wastes. I don't think it wastes its time with the Coalesced Mesa. I think maybe you still try a couple copies of Neostelia and you just accept that they're going to be tapped when they come into play. But I wanted to mess around with this to see how worthwhile it could be, and we're going to kind of feel the consequences of that in action as we play through this GP. So instead of the 17 planes we could be on, we're only on 8. Beyond that, we do have our sideboard to talk about. We're kind of split across three categories of, or not even three, really like two categories of sideboard cards, which is to say, interacting with our opponents' things that they are doing, and specifically shutting down things we will probably struggle with. So the interacting in a general sense is primarily handled by our removal. 3 copies of Sanctum of Repression. Oblivion Ring effects have always been pretty good in this field. Banishing Light, always pretty respectable in Revolution. And so what if our Banishing Light came down at 2 mana but required us to bounce a creature, or if we're targeting something with mana value 3 or less, we don't even need to bounce a creature. It's just a Banishing Light properly. Sanctum Repression can do a lot of really good things. If we pick off a token with Sanctum, there is 0 consequences to it being removed. We can, pick off key value tools that the opponent has, pick off blockers, much like Containment Seraph can do. Sanctum Repression just really, really does a lot in that role. We also have 3 copies of Plasma Strike. In practice, I've actually not loved the Plasma Strikes. I think if there were one immediate change I would make for this GP, even over the mana base, I'd probably be on the full playset of Sanctums and only 2 Plasma Strikes. But it is pretty relevant. There are going to be some pretty aggressive decks in the field, and so Plasma Strike does check a lot of that aggressive component of the field pretty effectively. And then we also have a pretty strange one here in Cloud 9. I'll be honest, this definitely catches some people off guard. The function of it is primarily just that it is an enchantment removal spell, so we can pick off opposing Sanctum Repressions, opposing Welkin Evictions, any sort of Banishing Light style effect that would pick off one of our things, we can then remove with Cloud 9 for only 1 mana. The efficiency is the key here. I want to do it for 1 mana if I can help it, over sending 2 mana for a more flexible tool. And the timing of it being sorcery really doesn't matter to me. The only thing I have that plays at instant speed are sideboard cards, and then Resolute Reinforcements, so I don't mind Cloud 9 being a sorcery. But the other important thing about Cloud 9 is that it is something that picks off an enchantment, but it can also apply a little bit of extra pressure in a pinch when we need it to. We can have this be 1 mana, put a +1/+1 counter on a creature we control to make our Ambitious Angel have 1 additional point of power and toughness. We can make her Soft Light Harmonist a 3/3, our Containment Seraph a 3/2. So even without a Consume the Divine, we can sort of amp up the stats of our creatures even just a little bit. So in matchups where we want to board in Cloud 9, that is sort of an avenue of attack that we can consider, rather than being committed to this being solely an anti-enchantment tool. So that is our board-based interaction. We also have stack interaction in the form of Gentle Grasp. Not really a proper counter spell, because while it does exile the spell, it does allow the player to recast the spell that we exile. But there are two valuable things here. The first is that, we put that card on layaway. It does not happen this turn. It cannot still happen this turn. So if there's a thing that our opponent really needs to get into play to keep us from killing them, Gentle Grasp can stop that from happening. The other thing that's really important with Gentle Grasp is that it hits... there's one particular card that is pretty dang impactful right now, which is to say Terminal Impact is pretty impactful right now. And one of the key things you'll see here is that this spell can't be countered. And, it's X and a red, deals damage equal mana spent to cast it to any target, so can pick off almost any of our creatures, can kill us from almost any range of health. But Gentle Grasp doesn't counter, it exiles the spell we target. So this does get around Terminal Impact's can't be countered clause, and does allow us to delay the opponent by a turn for their Terminal Impact. And when so often the opponent is likely to be spending all of their mana on a Terminal Impact, Gentle Grasp does just read as a Time Walk. So that is a little bit of an appeal to Gentle Grasp as well, against Terminal Impact related strategies. Just any big X cost spell where the opponent wants to spend the whole turn doing that, or like spend the whole turn doing a single spell, Gentle Grasp becomes a Time Walk. And when we are such a tempo focused aggressive strategy like this, Gentle Grasp being a Time Walk is much more significant. And then lastly, we have two categories of sort of funky hate artifacts, all at 2 mana. We have a pair of Primordial Gateway. As it enters, we choose Mourning, Oblation, or Prayer. We are very often going to choose Oblation, which says players can't sacrifice non-land permanents to cast spells or activate abilities. This is how we beat Envoy. This says Envoy cannot have its activated ability activated to sacrifice things. They are forced to play Envoy as a value card, and value Envoy is still pretty effective. It is still a 3/3 with lifelink, so it does still wall our creatures on the ground. It does still attack into us pretty comfortably. And pad the opponent's life total while doing it. But Primordial Gateway is our way to try and slow the tide of murder that Envoy is bringing our way. It does also have some niche utility with Mourning and Prayer, but I don't see us boarding it in for those reasons very often. Like, I don't think an opponent being on Fabricated Anomaly would be enough of a reason for me to want to bring this in on Mourning, just because there are so many triggered abilities that can allow you to discard cards to draw cards, and so Mourning not shutting those off is really awkward. And there's also Golden Bloom of the Silenced, which can take away all abilities from the name of a permanent we choose to name with Golden Bloom of the Silenced. So our opponents are very likely to have this as well as a very popular tool right now. Very likely that we get something from our deck silenced by the Golden Bloom on the opposing side of the field. But that's fine. Ultimately, you know, our cards have some relevant abilities higher up on the curve, but at the end of the day, the foremost value is in the first couple turns, where Golden Bloom of the Silence is less likely to be impactful. So being able to not be too impacted by opposing Golden Blooms is nice, and then our Golden Bloom can just come down and name something that is giving us some trouble. So it's very context dependent on the matchups that we run into, but can do some very nice things. Can also name Envoy and shut off Envoy. Can name other kill condition cards. But the important thing is that we have to name a permanent card, otherwise it won't function. So we can't name an instant or a sorcery, and we have to think about the things not having the abilities on the battlefield. So if we name Karina Substitute, its enter ability still functions because it is not a permanent until it is on the battlefield, and its enter effect modifies how it enters the battlefield. So from my understanding, by the time it enters the battlefield, it would no longer be named Karina's Substitute, so Golden Bloom of the Silence would not work there. But yeah, so that is this deck. I've chosen to call it Divine President for Consume the Divine and Tomer Figurehead President. I, in playtesting, have gotten Tomer down on turn 2 a couple times. I went 4-1 in a league run with this deck, which is what convinced me that there was something here that I could justify bringing to the GP. If I go 0 wins, 2 losses, then we go 0 wins, 2 losses, and we just kind of roll with it. I would love to push this deck as far as we can. I've openly said to community members that my objective this month is to get Radiant Devotee nerfed. I can be perfectly happy with this card going unchanged, but I do think it is beyond problematic in the way that it exists right now. In the decklist stream, Dr. Chipmunk compared this to Affinity and said this is the Affinity deck the format has right now, and it's had me thinking over the last couple days that I almost wonder if Radiant Devotee would genuinely be fairer if it gave your angel spells affinity for soldiers, because then you're not free casting Aegis of Grace off of 4 soldiers. You're not like you're still probably casting Tomer for very little, but like it means that you cannot just go Radiant Devotee, spit out Ambitious Angels, spit out Soft Light Harmonist. You know, it does significantly drop down the impact of Radiant Devotee in that regard. So if Devotee does prove to be really strong here this month, then I wonder how it could feel if it just gave your angel spells affinity for soldiers. Especially since, you know, that doesn't require them to tap. So in that way, you know, you're not sacrificing aggression to rush your angels out in that context. So there's more aggression provided there, but you're not cheating as much mana as Devotee currently allows you to cheat. So we'll see how this deck fares. I'm really excited to jam some games with it, but I do think we are going to have some really rough matches this GP. There's just so much graveyard value right now. And while we have a lot of very flexible options for Graveyard Hate, this is not the kind of archetype that wants to be jamming a bunch of Graveyard Hate, because any time we spend on that is time we do not spend developing our board, and that is just such a tempo negative that I don't think we can really afford to spend a ton of focus on the opposing graveyard. So we'll have to try and navigate those graveyard relevant matchups where we can, but we'll see how that all shakes out. So with everything said and done, I'm very excited to get into these matches. As you are seeing this, the first match should already be live, though I, as of recording, have not played it yet. So feel free to stick around to the end card, where there should be a link to the thumbnail of the first round matchup. And otherwise, you can also catch that in the Revolution Media channel on the Custom Magic Discord, which can be found in the description below as always. So, with everything said and done, I hope you all are excited to experience me playing this truly interesting mono white aggro strategy with one of the mana bases of all time, and ready to send off the standard 2025 tournament year with a bang. So I will see you all in the round 1 match, and in the meantime, I'll also see you all in the Revolution chat. Bye-bye.